Hey everyone, welcome to the Kontent Rocks podcast. This is episode number 5 of the podcast, and Kontent Rocks is all about all things content by Kentico, .NET, and Azure. My name is Brian McKeiver. As always, I'm your host for the podcast, and today I'm really happy to be joined by my good friend Andy Thompson from Luminary. Andy, how's it going?
Good, thanks, Brian. Nice to be here again. Always a pleasure to join you.
Well, you're right. I definitely love having the CTO of a fantastic agency as a good partner of mine and BizStream's, and having you on the show is something I always get excited about. I literally think we tried to plan this for at least 3 months during the holidays, and I'm very excited that we're able to actually make it happen.
Yeah, sorry about that. Australia kind of just goes to sleep for a little while over Christmas. We eat too much, and in the heat, we fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, very jealous of that because it's currently snowing outside here in Michigan, but I forgot to mention, our topic today, the reason I'm very excited to have Andy on the show is we're going to try to answer this question of this term that I've been seeing more and more, and actually you might have heard on the podcast previously about what is a composable DXP? Is it a buzzword? Is it a trending topic? What kind of thing is it? Is it an actual solution that we were going to use with our customers? It's something that's new. It's becoming more popular, and I couldn't imagine a better guest to have talk about it on the show with me. So we're going to basically dive right in, and I'm going to toss the question right to you, Andy. Like, when you hear that, like composable DXP as a phrase, what does that mean to you?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because especially now that confusingly we've heard a few DXP vendors describe themselves as a composable DXP. But what I think of that is that if you're going with a composable DXP, that means you're not really selecting a DXP. You're going to build your own DXP. That's what it says to me. You or an agency partner or someone is going to help you piece together the equivalent of a traditional DXP out of all the many sort of focused services that are out there that could be integrated together. Think of a jigsaw puzzle rather than a picture hanging on the wall. That's sort of the way I think of it.
Yeah, I would add, like, the pieces of the puzzle are really like major other systems that are productized, that are fully out there, best of breed tools that do the marketing automation or the CRM or commerce or CMS. And the idea of composability means we can put them together very easily and actually have the freedom to choose different ones, right? It's not chosen for us. I think that's a big part of the idea of composability.
Absolutely. I mean, and it might sound familiar that anyone who's implemented a DXP before has probably integrated with other platforms before, but this is, I guess, taking it that next level and embracing that idea that you're sort of almost going integration first. You're not starting with a platform that ticks most of the boxes and then replacing one part with an email marketing system, for example. You're going out there and you're saying, right, I have a requirement for content management, email marketing, personalization, and commerce. Pick the 4 best vendors that do that and bring them together into some sort of kind of Voltron CMS or DXP that does everything you need exactly how you need it, the best way possible, and gives you the freedom to choose that and not have to compromise. Really, that's the dream scenario anyway.
Well, plus 5 points for bringing Voltron into it. I really love the reference.
Any opportunity.
Yes. Have I mentioned our newest conference room here at BizStream is the Castle of Lions, which is again related to Voltron as well. Their headquarters. So I just had to get that tangent in there because it made me smile. But I think I actually want to pick up on what you were last speaking of. Is maybe you find the 4 or 5 vendors or platforms or tools that you like and put them together in this scenario. There's another very real scenario where maybe you are a large enterprise organization and you already have maybe 3 or 2 of those pieces in play and you don't want to switch them out, but you need to fill a gap and bring other tools together without having to like reinvent the whole world in your solution, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not talking about, with a composable DXP, you're not really talking about small websites. You're talking about big organizations who have significant requirements. They probably have a CIO or a CTO or a whole marketing and IT departments driving this. You're probably looking at a large organization. So yeah, they're not starting from scratch, typically. They've probably already got something significant in place. They might already be using Salesforce for a whole bunch of what they're doing. or they might already be using some data platform or some really advanced marketing automation platform. So absolutely, it's not necessarily going shopping for every requirement. Often a couple of requirements are really, really well defined already. And that's where a traditional DXP might come in, and there might be a clash with some of the requirements. Like, oh, do we use the email marketing out of here, or do we use the one we've already got? Do we use the commerce out of what we're buying, or do we use what's already working? And a composable DXP allows you more flexibility there, I think.
Right. Well, I think it's also time to bring to this conversation, since the fact that the show is called Kontent Rocks, and you happen to be a content MVP. Congratulations once again on achieving that.
And to you.
So do I. Let's answer a little bit about, content's answer to this question as well, because they're one of the components that you could consider easily added or integrated into a composable DXP.
Yeah.
So actually, Kontent has some description of this on their site as well. I think it does a decent job, but what we aren't really trying to do today is to just talk about the exact marketing that Kontent has around the term composable DXP, because you know what? Many DXP platforms out there are actually all sort of referencing pretty much what Gartner has said about this, and about how it's future-proofing your organization's choices in technologies. And really, this page kind of brings that graphic or that vision to light. And I think it's worth probably talking about. And if you're just listening, I'm scrolling down the page at Content's What is a Composable DXP site, and I'm going to actually open up the Gartner diagram that I think kind of makes it concretely explained when we talk about how is composable DXP different than maybe just a DXP by itself, as we've come to know before. So I'm going to ask Andy to kind of visualize this for our listeners. Andy, when you see this graphic from Gartner and their definition, do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it in your experience?
I absolutely do. It shows very quickly that, they're comparing composable to monolithic DXP. So we're still within the realm of digital experience platforms, but the big difference here is a monolithic DXP tries to give you everything you would need from one vendor. And there are plenty of, we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, but there are plenty of vendors who are doing this very successfully, by the way. So I'm not saying this one is bad, one is good, but it's just a very different approach. So monolithic DXP is trying to give you everything that you could need in a digital experience platform, whereas a composable DXP is, by definition, it is not one platform. It's an approach, and you can see there they've got things like presentation and content, search, analytics, personalization, integrations, all different pieces that fit together. And the composable DXP side, I think it speaks to it really well. Whereas on the monolithic side, they're providing all that sort of stuff: CMS, search, commerce, personalization, the presentation, everything all in one. Which is also a valid approach. Yeah, I think this diagram sums it up pretty well for me. I think what's possibly missing for a lot of people is examples, but we can talk about that soon as well. A lot of people don't see words like orchestration and multi-experience, and it doesn't really click for them straight away. But if you're a CMO looking at this, you probably do. You probably understand it.
And I think, in case you're not actually looking at the screen, we have Monolithic on the left hand, and it is a very blue graphic, and it's got the boxes in one big box that bring together all the pieces that Andy had just talked through, right? It's all one color, it's all almost one size. Whereas on the other side of the screen, the other part of the diagram, we actually have the different components represented with different colors as opposed to all one color. And I think that's a subtle nuance that matters here, because what they're trying to say with the different colors is, hey, that could be a whole different system. That could be a different tool altogether, but they're still connected and cohesive as a full solution. And that's the clarity that I see when I look at this diagram. I think I agree with you. I basically think Gartner, they did a great job of explaining the two sides of the coin that we have here.
I think it's good to point to something like Gartner. I mean, I also like Content's explanation, but if you're looking for information on composable DXP, I would be careful looking at vendor explanations, because everyone wants to be considered the best in every scenario. However, Gartner are really well trusted by a lot of our customers, they're an independent research organization, that people really look to. So I'd back that definition as well.
Yep. I think a lot of other platforms vendors are building the same example from Gartner. So I agree. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I'm gonna move away from that diagram and talk about kind of our inspiration for this podcast episode is really I'm going through a current project right now where I have content as my headless CMS, and it doesn't matter which headless CMS, you could be using anything. But I also, for this client, I'm putting together a commerce solution for them, and we're going to use a headless commerce offering and bring those two worlds together. It's kind of like, in my mind, the first start of composability. We have our two main systems identified, and now we're actually running into, well, wait a minute, we've got products that make up product detail pages and SKUs, and we want to buy these products and sell them to certain segments. Should everything live in the commerce solution? Because it could do that on its own. Or should things live more in the headless CMS content solution, because it's more content that needs to be augmented based off what we're going to integrate the headless commerce platform with. So this is becoming a very real challenge for our architecture team here at BizStream, and providing like the best recommendations, because there are literally so many options at this point of we could do it in 10 different ways. And not to mention, this customer has their own internal API that has a lot of middleware, configuration, pricing. So we're actually bringing together multiple APIs to really kind of create their next generation of their site. And it's very exciting. I'm actually loving this project because of the different tools that we're going to be able to use to pull off, I think, what's going to be an amazing website. But Andy, are you running into projects like that you have to do now with your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. And the same experience. I think you need to understand what you're getting into. Similar to just any headless project, really. There's going to be some integrations or some glue that you're going to need to do. But Composable DXP is taking that another step further. You mentioned your architecture team. I think if you don't have an architecture team, if you don't have some pretty switched on people in your organization, or if you're not working with an agency who can provide that expertise, solution architecture is really where it's at, because there is the definition of a composable DXP is that it's not a standard set that works together the same way every time. So every time you compose a new DXP, you're going to have to do that architecture. You're going to have to understand the way things get together. Now, that's not always a bad thing. As you just said, it's going to be a really fun project. This is the kind of stuff that developers, start drooling about, the wanting to do this sort of thing. But yeah, we've come across a couple of examples, and specifically the ones you're talking about. It's a really common one is where you want to have commerce, but also a really strong content and experience driven sort of site. So website or app. So an example of what you were talking about earlier, where they've come to the table with a couple of pieces pre-selected, and they don't want to go to an all-in-one. So we had two projects actually recently who both wanted commerce, but they also wanted a nice headless content experience, and they had plans to add an app on later. So a headless CMS made a huge amount of sense, but also they wanted commerce. So they went with Shopify Plus, which is quite a common headless platform and actually has some really good APIs. It's got a GraphQL storefront API, which is really nice. Integration options are really good. And they chose that because it was really good at what it did, managing the products, the discounts, the customers, all that sort of stuff. Its integration is really good. And also the checkout experience. And you see that a lot, actually, people doing coupling Shopify and doing their own custom shop experience and just using the checkout experience from Shopify. So that's a good example where they've gone, Shopify does an amazing checkout and does product management, so let's use that. And then they used Content by Kentico for the content, and that gave them complete flexibility with the front end as well. So they could use their GraphQL, and they could do a static site. They rendered it out statically. They actually did an MVP on one presentation layer to get live really quickly, and then rebuilt a combined experience with Shopify and web content all in one using Next.js, which was really cool. And they're currently building the app version of their online store without having to change any of those other systems. Using the same CMS, same commerce provider, just building an app. So that's a real success story. We've got another one coming up for a large charity that are looking at, again, their commerce requirements are really specialized. All they really need is donations and the ability to purchase a gift on behalf of someone else, in a sponsorship thing on behalf of someone else. And the rest of it, they have completely different requirements. So they're looking at a personalization tool and headless CMS and a whole bunch of other things as well. So they can sort of say, yep, the commerce piece is done, the marketing automation optimization is done, the headless CMS is done. Now let's build the best experience we can. So yeah, we're seeing those examples, and commerce is often a driver. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. Well, I think we've talked, enough about the benefits of Composable DXP, the flexibility that it gives you to bring in new tools, reuse ones you already have, use best of breed specific task type of systems and maybe components. There's other words for it too, but I actually want to kind of close a little bit with, there's no such thing as one solution fits all in my mind. So there are times when Composable DXP may not be like the right fit for your organization. So don't get us wrong. While we're big fans of this approach, as I think you can all tell if you're listening, and it's new and it's modern and it has some great flexibility there, I'm not saying it's the right choice for everyone all the time. And you can call me crazy if you want to, Andy, but there I think some definitely cases where it's not the right fit actually.
Oh, 100%. There's a good reason the monolithic traditional DXP platforms are still really popular and will be for a long time to come. I think, with great power comes great responsibility. I know that was off Spider-Man, I think, but it's true. You have to know what you're getting into, and I would only do it if I actually really did want to use one of these platforms, or I had some really specific requirements. These traditional DXPs have been out there for decades now, and they know the market quite well. And the thing is, for a lot of fairly normal projects, so if you just want to do web publishing, and you just have fairly run-of-the-mill sort of requirements around analytics and basic personalization, and you might want very basic commerce or all that, there's a lot of platforms that might suit your needs. If you don't have an architecture team, or you're not partnering with an agency that can provide that expertise, or you have a small marketing team, maybe what you want is to pay a vendor to give you everything ready to go. So sure, you'll do your custom design and you'll implement it, but essentially you want everything in the one spot. You want people to log into one system and have one interface and have everything there. That's absolutely valid. And we often talk people through, do you understand what you're getting yourself into? Like, yeah, this is a really cool, exciting approach that will give you access to the best tools, but do you understand what you're biting off here?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to give you, some kudos here. At your blog at luminary.com, there's some great pieces of content about that process, right, of helping people decide. So I encourage everyone who's listening to go check out luminary.com/blog. Andy's got some posts on there. The rest of the company's got some nice posts as well. So,
well, it's a huge part of what we do. We don't want to recommend the wrong approach to someone, or they're not going to have a good project, not going to have a good experience, and that's right. What it's about. However, at the same time, if they're ready for this approach, I'm guns blazing.
Yep. Because we didn't necessarily talk about like the other additional challenges that Composable DXP brings in this episode, and maybe that's a great future episode idea, because when you bring a lot of these places together, how do you handle things like logging across all the systems, admin credentials into the many different platforms you may need admin tools of? There's some other angles of where Monolithic or all-in-ones, they just have all that ready for you, and it's already part of the solution, and you don't have to worry about the extra layers of what about this, and this. And maybe that is something that we can talk about in the future, Andy, because I would love to have you back on the show again. Because believe it or not, we're actually out of time for today. And I got to get home to shovel the driveway because it's been snowing all day here in Michigan.
Yeah, it is not snowing here.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of that. But thank you so much for joining me today, Andy. if anyone wants to reach out to find out more from you, is the best place to reach out to Twitter or any other channels you want them to reach out to you about?
Yeah. Find me on Twitter or LinkedIn or it's pretty easy to guess my email. It's just andy@luminary.com. Send me an email. Or
Nice.
catch me at a bunch of content user groups or conferences, things like that. You'll find me.
Yep. See, another thing we have in common, Brian@bizstream.com is just as easy. It's like we're parallels of each other, just living in different parts of the world.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy. And thanks, everyone, for listening. This is, again, the Kontent Rocks podcast. This is the episode about what is a Composable DXP. I hope we answered it for you today. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.